Hello. Okay. Hi. So, I can do Windows. Welcome. I'm Sean. I'm the creator of Ballad of the Pistolero, and we're just gonna kind of. Hello. Okay. Go through it. I'm gonna mute Twitch here. I can do Windows. Welcome. I'm Sean. I'm the. All right. So. All right. Now that all that crazy fun's out of the way. So Ballad of the Pistolero is a RPG. It's set in the cinematic Wild West. What is the hell does that mean? So basically, what that means is we took more inspiration from movies and popular culture of the West than actual history. In fact, there's a couple places in the book that basically say, "Yeah, fuck history. Don't pay attention to it." You know, it's not what drives things. So this is more, kind of how you picture, view, have fun with the West, as opposed to just sticking it to how it was or how we thought it was or whatever. I'm gonna turn this light on, see if that makes me look a little better. Yeah, this is some top notch streaming. I'll tell you what. All right, so throughout the book, we kind of go for finding ways to introduce narrative any way we can, since it is more about narrative than anything else, because it's a short rule set. It's only 34 pages right now. It'll get a little longer when there's art and whatnot, but not excuse me, not terribly much longer or bigger. So throughout the book, kind of as an introduction, we've got two old cowpokes who are sitting on the kind of veranda outside of a general store, chit chatting, and they're kind of giving you the introduction. So they're Zeke and Jed, and so they pop up throughout the book. Kind of you see them here in italics, and they just are kind of the narrators through the book. So they pop up. They were fun to write because again, you're just looking for any narrative juice you can squeeze out of a set of rules to make the book fun to read. Because sometimes you pick up a rule book and you're like, oh, more rules and math and you're like, this is boring. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to play this. So the idea is to make it fun. So there's what I was saying earlier about history here. Because if if the rule set kind of leans into, I don't know, it's just a bunch of white dudes out in the desert, then people are going to lean into playing that sometimes. But if we can work to avoid that idea, then in the text, then it kind of comes out and it doesn't play that way as much. So that's important, and we hit that twice, really. So we start with simple, good old how to play. So Ballad of the Pistolero is a D100 system, kind of like your old Warhammer Fantasies or your newer Spyhanders or your Calls of Cthulhu. Just it seemed, since it's a more character death is a little more pertinent, happens more often. It seemed the D100 was kind of the mindset to go in more than the D&D D20. So again, we set, not use my hand, I have a mouse. So we set the scene with kind of a description and a story. So kind of each chapter tries to tell a little story that will then be used in the descriptive text as we go through the rules. Because again, we want to make the book fun and interesting to read. We don't want it to just be a set of bland rules. And also, this is nowhere near what the final layout will look like. This is just, what I was able to quickly mop together in Google Documents. I would never sell something that was just thrown together in Google Docs. And I write in Google Docs because I do a lot of work at work. So we start with the main juice of the system is skill tests. So you test against your skill where you're trying to roll below it, and then there's difficulty tests added to it. So you have here our difficulty modifiers. So the narrator will say, okay, well, you want to try to escape from the man in black who's looking for you in the bar. That's going to be hard. So you would say, okay, look at, and he would say if acrobatics or something test or stealth. Well, yeah, it's a stealth test and it's hard. So you would look at your stealth. You would see if you had any ranks to it. You would add that together, and then you would minus the difficulty, and that's the number that you need to then roll under, and you'll announce that to the table. So there's not a ton of secret rolls. There's some, but there's not a whole lot. We have an advantage disadvantage system. So if that happens, what you'll do is you'll just add a third d10, and you'll roll all three, and you'll know which one was your extra one. And if putting the extra one in the tens place makes it better or worse, you have to take it depending on whether you have advantage or disadvantage. And if you would have failed, but the other one was a critical failure, then that's the one you have to take if you have disadvantage. Same with if there's a success, but one success is a crit. If you have advantage, you take the crit. And criticals are doubles. So in combat, if you crit, you do more damage, or your gun jams. And then if it's a test, then the narrator will describe you succeeding in awesome fashion or failing in spectacular fashion. As well, we have opposed tests. So for that one player who you always have, who's like, I'm going to be a wrestling grappler, because we all have those people. That's where you'll use opposed tests, or if you're playing cards or kind of staring each other down. That's opposed tests. You both roll. You find how much difference is between the two. But if one of you fails and one of you passes, then it's easy peasy. So again, we kind of we describe all that, all those tests I just went through, and we describe here with the story of the man in black looking for Frederick in the bar. And then everything, combat, medical, wounds, it's all skill tests. This is the core of the system, which is the core of any D100 system. Really, it's what you put on top of it that sets you apart and makes you different. So, character creation. So how do you build your Pistolero? I'm going to kind of roll through this relatively quickly because I did a video where I went through character creation, which you can find. It's on this Twitch channel. It's on my YouTube channel. It's also on the Kickstarter page. Basically, you've got your ability scores, so your brawn, your quick draw, your vitality, your book learning, your common sense, and your charm. You roll some d10s, you'll add some numbers, you'll get those. Those will have modifiers. They're like the core of what makes your character. Then you have hit points, stamina, moxie, and luck. So your hit points are always going to be a very small pool, and once you're taking damage to your hit points, that's like actually bullets and knives ripping through your flesh, as opposed to your stamina, which is kind of that pool of energy that lets you move forward faster, kind of push through being tired, and it's a shield over your hit points. And then moxie is that kind of that trait that lets you push forward harder, longer, faster. And it's what runs all of your feats and your skills. And then you have luck, which is exactly what it says it is. It's luck. And the idea is the stamina, moxie, and luck are kind of these three pools of resources that you have, and they recharge at different rates. So your moxie fully recharges every time you rest, and you can recharge it with liquor. Your stamina recharges to half and then to full each time you rest. So it takes a little longer to get your stamina back, but you can use medicines and whatnot to kind of patch your stamina back up to half if you need to. And then your luck never recharges. Because once your luck runs out, your luck runs out. And you can test against all of these, and you spend them. So that's what kind of drives the game. Is you're spending your moxie, your stamina, and your luck. And then also during the turns, you'll get action points, which we'll cover here in a minute. Alright. So you need to always know when you're at full, what's your half threshold and what's your 1/3 threshold. This is especially true for your stamina, because once you're at half and then once you're at a third, you start to bleed and you'll start to incur wounds every time you get hit. So when you're at half health, you start to bleed and you take moderate injuries, and then you take greater injuries at a third. And if you don't patch up bleeding, you're just going to start to just lose stamina very quickly, and you can die just from the bleed damage. Alright, so every turn you get 3 action points, and those are what you spend to do things like move, shoot, etc., etc. And your action points, they stack, so you get 3 every round, and if you don't spend them, they just go into your action point pool. You can have up to 10. So if you hide behind the crate for a couple of rounds, you can just pop out and you can just unload with your pistol, and you can run, and you can, kind of go all Neo Matrix on people. Instead of classes, since this is kind of in that vein of your Call of Cthulhu's and your Warhammers, we have professions. So at the start of character creation, you pick your profession, and in this basic set of rules, we have 11. Because again, we were trying to keep it nice and small and svelte. And then you pick your hat. So that kind of is the version of alignment. So we have white hats, brown hats, and black hats. It's the scale from good to bad. And if that sounds like I stole it from Westworld, I did. But it's such a awesome piece of shorthand, and you see it all throughout movies. So I rolled with it, and it's a good way, instead of having this granular alignment that people ignore, or then go, well, I'm chaotic neutral, so I can do whatever I want, So try to avoid the alignment bullshit, but still have some semblance of it. And then for your background, what we do is we've got this Mad Libs paragraph where they're talking about you, and then you will fill in your name, what pronouns you use, your hometown, an ideal, a goal, a flaw, quick bit of family history, and then anything else you want to add to your Pistolero. And we have a whole bunch of things sitting over here in Appendix A, which is not yet connected to the book, with ideals, there we go, flaws, goals, and then we have got we have a ton of names, and we're still working on more and more names. So we've got your Anglo-white American names, we've got some Mexican names, which are more just Spanish names, and I looked up some Chinese names, and then we've got towns and cities where you can come from. Like I said, this is still a list that I'm collating and gathering together. And that will be much more robust in the final book. So here we've got our skills, professions, and feats. So once you get your profession, each profession comes with a talent, and then we've got a set of feats which kind of modify talents and skill tests, and then you've got your actual skills that you use to test against. Alright, so when you pick your profession, so here's the bandit here. You've got a little bit of flavor, and then you've got your talent. So the bandit can make intimidation tests with +20 and cause people to be frightened of them, and they have advantage on those feared targets. And then at the start of their next turn, the target can attempt to be unfeared. And then they gain a bonus as they run away. And then you get 6 proficiencies. This is a slightly outdated PDF that I'm looking at right here. It only has 4, but they're at 6 now. So, and then you've got your starting gear, and lastly, you've got your advanced chart. Let me actually go to a different PDF, because that one is really, the advanced chart looks different. That one's a little too outdated. Here we go. Scroll down here. All right. So, here we go. So you've got your ability scores that you can upgrade, and then your secondary abilities. And you'll have 10 advances, and you'll get 2 of them at the start when you're creating your character. So when you see advances here, that means that's the total amount that you can up your ability score, and you up them in 5% increments when the narrator gives you an advance. If you take a skill proficiency rank, if you see skill under secondary, that means you get plus 10 in a picked skill. If you see feat, you get to pick a feat. Everyone starts with a feat, but some classes get more and more feats. If you see moxie, you get to add plus 1d10 to your moxie. Same with stamina. Alright, and that's your profession. Pretty cut and dry, it's simple. You get items, you get proficiencies. See, I said there's the 6. And then you get a talent. So like the cowboy can hog tie people, the bounty hunter's good at finding people, there's the bandit who has intimidation. The doctor is very good at keeping people alive. There's a skill we'll cut to later that you have to do if you're trying to prevent bleeding, and the doctor can not only stop you from bleeding, but they can give you stamina back. A duelist can just unload right at the top of a round. The gambler is always kind of living on the edge and can change what his skill tests are before he sees them. The homesteader's got a shotgun and he can just blow you away with it. The lawman was possibly the most powerful but most dangerous talent in the game. Basically, so we have a duel system, which we'll cover here in a second. And you don't have to accept a duel when someone calls you out, unless the lawman does it. Because the lawman can just call you out and you have to accept the duel. So they can, kill the big bad of a story like that, but they could also die like that. Because it's a duel. The madam has got a lot of skills with charm. The pugilist can just kind of keep hitting you and hitting you and hitting you. The Pinkerton is a detective. The saloon keeper's got a flask that you can just kind of hand around to party members, and they get more moxie back. And the soldier is basically able to push beyond what he could. He can get his stamina and his action points back. Basically, he turns his moxie into stamina and action points. And then the stagecoach driver is great at driving, because he's the driver. Alright, so here we have our skills, and each skill is connected, as you see, to to an ability score. So like fighting is talented, trigger to brawn, guns to quick draw, investigation to book learning. And again, we kind of describe it with a little piece of narrative, and then there's 2 kinds of skills. There are basic and there are advanced skills. So if you test a basic skill, you just use the difficulty that's been assigned and your proficiency ranks. If it's an advanced skill that you don't have any proficiency ranks in, you have to test with disadvantage because you don't really know it. And other things like counterfeiting and disguise and driving and eavesdropping and gambling. It's just things you have to have really kind of learned. And then we've got feats. So you get a feat when you create your character, and then a lot of other characters can get feats from upgrades and advancements. And a lot of times the feats they add on to your skills and ability. So like if you're a happy drunk, you're going to gain extra moxie from alcohol. Dark jokes, if you would need to take a resolve test because you saw something horrible, you can spend some moxie and have advantage because you have that horrible dark sense of humor and you hide behind jokes. you can regain some stamina at the beginning of your turn. You can be good at dodging. Light sleeper, you don't need to sleep very much. You can... there's a lot of little things. This is where you can kind of really put your own spin on your character. Is with the feats. And then we move to combat, which is a small part of the game because it's mostly role-playing. But when combat does come out, we expect it to be very quick and decisive, and pistoleros will probably drop. Because, I mean, if you think about it, at the end of a Western movie, you know, after the big showdown, how many people are actually still standing? So, you get your action points, and that's what you spend them on. So you can then spend your action points to attack, and an attack is every time you pull the trigger. So if you've got like a revolver, and you've got 6 action points, you can attack 6 times. I mean, in the next turn, you're going to be spending action points to reload your revolver, but you can do that. Dodge, after you've been... a hit has been scored, you can attempt to dodge if you've got the action points. You can move, you can sprint, which is moving faster. You can stem the flow, which is where if you're bleeding, you try to stop bleeding. You can reload, and each weapon has a different action point value for that. And you can perform skill tests, basic and advanced. Attacking, again, it's a gun skill test, and then the difficulty table is keyed to how many people are around you, if you're outnumbered or if you're outnumbering the bad guys. And then if you crit, you'll do a crap ton more damage. So that just describes critting and hitting. When you fall to half your stamina, you're going to start to bleed, and you have to roll on the minor injury table. And then when your stamina falls to a third, any damage taken requires you to roll on the major injury table. So you're just getting shot to shit. And then once you start taking damage to your hit points, you also have to roll on the major injury table. And if you reach 0 hit points, you're bleeding out and you're unconscious. And if nobody comes to help you within a round, you die. You bleed out. So stemming the flow is a heal test, and then it's modified based on how many injuries you've already stacked up. So, you know, if you're bleeding out and you've stacked up 3 or 4 injuries, I mean, it's hard to save that person in the heat of the moment. And if you are bleeding, you're going to take a D10 damage at the start of your turn. Excuse me, just lots of talking. Alright, so we have duels, and if you call someone out in a duel, what it is it's a flat roll versus roll. So you take, each side has a D10, and then for each level of proficiency you have in the gun skill, you get a D6, up to a max of 3d6. And then both parties will pick up their dice, and then they're going to wait for the narrator or a neutral party to call draw, and they're both going to then roll their dice, and then whoever gets the highest number wins the duel. There's no dodging, there's nothing else is involved in the duel. It is just simply a roll off. And if the roll is a draw, then both sides missed. At this point, you can just kind of walk away with your honor intact, or you can go again. So duels, very dangerous, but you can again just solve a problem real quick if you think you can outroll someone. And then kind of an optional rule with the action points is you can take poker chips, and as you know, you get action points, you store your little chips, and then as you spend them, you throw them into the pool. In some later editions and add-ons, we might do some things with the action point pool, later, but for right now, it's an optional rule. It's one of those cases where you need to know when you're reaching too far with systems, and that's one. So it's an optional rule right now, but we'll probably play with it down the road later. So we've got your injury table. So like your minor injuries are, you get grazed, so you might have some disadvantage, or you drop your weapon. They're not awful. And then you've got your major injury table, which is a lot worse. Like you get a round through the knee, concussions, maimed foots, punctured lungs, your ear gets blown off. You can also just straight up die on the major injury table. So, if you get shot in the neck or you get hit in the head, you're pretty much screwed. Especially if you get shot in the head, you're just dead. So some of the ways you can kind of regain some of your stuff is by healing and drinking. So healing major injuries and regaining hit points. You can go to the doctor and you take some vitality tests, and there's a lot of ways you can make them better or worse based on the quality of the doctor you find and how much you pay them, and if you've got any friends with medical training. And that's all detailed here, but it still comes down to it's just a heal test. And then for each success and how many successes you get is kind of they heal your injuries up. And some major injuries are permanent even if you heal them. And then drinking, you get Moxie back for taking shots. But also as you take shots, you have to start taking resolve tests to not get drunk. And once you fail that test, you're drunk, and then you have to take another one when you wake up in the morning. And if you fail that, you're hungover, and you don't get your Moxie and your stamina back. Because you had a bad night, and now you're hungover, and you're kind of stumbling around. So there's a give and a take with drinking, and then we've got your standard status effects: blinded, deafened, frightened, grappled, incapacitated, poisoned, and such and such. And then if you want to play on a grid, 5 feet squares, boom, done, grid. Or hexes, whatevs. So we have weapons, and all your weapons will show you what they are, their range, how much damage they do, how much it costs to reload them, and then a price if you wanted to buy it at a store. So we've got, Bowie knives, brass knuckles, shotguns, your good old Colt single action army, a LeMat. So if you watched Westworld, what Ed Harris's character had, the revolver with the shotgun. You got a sword, cavalry sabers, derringers, and a couple different kinds of rifles, and tomahawks. And then you've got your general store, which has just got a whole list of items you can pick up and how much they cost. Kind of scroll through that real quick. And then we have a quick chapter on how to create bad guys. So our bad guys come in 3 tiers. And if you're looking at any of our published adventures, which will come out later, they'll have stat blocks for all the bad guys. But this is a quick way for a narrator to throw a bad guy out. So like a tier 1 villain, they don't pose a whole lot of threat. They'll only have one attribute that's over 40%, and they'll only have skill proficiency with 2 skills. They have no feats, they have no stamina pool, and they can only perform 1 of 3 actions. They can move, they can shoot, they can dash. And then the way we do our bad guys is they have damage thresholds. So you have to do X amount of damage, and that takes a tick off their... So once you break the threshold, they have X amount of hits. So like a tier 1 bad guy is going to have a damage threshold between 6 and 10, and they can only take 1 to 2 hits. So if you do 6 damage and then like 8 damage, he's dead. But if you do 6 damage and 4 damage, his threshold's only down 1. And critting tends to count as 2 hits when it comes to thresholds. So if I crit on this tier 1 villain and did 15 damage, that would count as 2 hits at 15, and he would be dead. Tier 2 villains, they have a little more heft, they have a few more skills, they can do a few more things, they can move or shoot or dash, and they can dodge. So they have a few more options, and then they have a higher damage threshold. Same with Tier 3 villains. These would be kind of the lieutenant, the bully at the beginning of a game. They're going to have some abilities over 50. They're going to have more skills. They're going to have feats. And they can attack twice. They can move. They can dash. They can do a lot more things. And then a Tier 4 villain is quite literally another Pistolero, who's got all of their advancements. And then that's how you generate bad guys. And then, real quick, so that's the player's handbook. And when we launch in August, this is the product. Of course, filled with a ton more art and formatting that doesn't look like I mocked it up in Google Docs as I was writing it. And you can see the beginnings of some of the art we have, which is done by our artist Sean Goodison. And the book will be full of that nice, cool color art. And then the way our adventures are going to work, and the adventure I'm working on right now, which will hopefully come out in October, is instead of it being A to B to C like tight narrative, it's an entire county in New Mexico, Fate County, and it's got 3 towns, and then and the towns have all got a bunch of like plot hooks and little things that are going on in them, and NPCs and characters that you can interact with. So you kind of roll from area to area as your background and your player hooks and the story that you are putting together at the table dictates. And then we've also, for overland travel, and we have the deck of Wilderness Adventure, which is a card deck, a standard playing card deck, and a table. So you draw from the card deck and you consult the table. And then if things are getting slow or you need to string an adventure together really quickly, you can use the deck of mini tropes, which is the same thing. It's a list of tropes that'll be kind of laid out, and then it's tied to a standard deck of 52 playing cards, with the number cards being very standard tropes, and then they get modified based on the suit, and then the face cards are all unique things that can happen. And so that's what the adventure is going to be like. It's more a toolbox and a tooly sandbox than it is a tight narrative, but there's a lot of little narratives all throughout it. So that is Ballad of the Pistolero. You can find us on Kickstarter now. We have 4 days left as of this recording on the 20th. We're getting there. I hope we make it. I think we can if we push. So thank you for watching this. And if you watched it live, awesome. If you didn't, it'll be on YouTube real soon. All right. Peace out. Thank you for joining.